So we'll start with Mangalacharan. Om Ajnanatimirandhasya Jnananjana-shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namah Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtham Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yutapadakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavanscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagan Raghunatanvitam Tam Sajivam साधवैतम सावधूतम परिजन सहितम कृष्ण चैतन्य देवम श्री राधा कृष्ण पादान सहगण ललिता श्री विशाखानुतम हे कृष्ण करुणा सिंधु दीन बंधु जगतपते गोपेश गोपिका कांत राधा कांता नमस्तुते तप्त कांचन गौरांगी राधे वृंदावनेश्वरी वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये वाञ्छाकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्य एव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवासादि गौर भक्त वृंद। हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे। अनंत कोटि वैष्णव वृंद की जय। श्रील प्रभुपाद की जय। So we are discussing from Bhagavad Gita chapter 14 verse number 11 today. I'll just yeah.
Hare Krishna, Pritha Basu.
Hare Krishna Mataji.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji.
Thank you for joining us.
You're welcome.
Okay, so I'll be reciting the verses and everyone else can follow.
Okay.
Sarvadvareshu dehesmin
Sarvadvesu
Sarvadvaresmin
prakasha upajayate
Prakasha upajayate
jnanam yada tada vidyat
Jnanam yada vidya
vivriddham sattvamiti uta
Vivradam sattvamiti uta
Sarvadvareshu dehesmin
Sarvadvareshu dehesmin
prakasha upajayate
Prakasha upajayate
Jnanam yada tada vidyat
Jnanam
Jnanam yada tada vidyad
Vivriddham sattvamiti uta
Vivradam
Vidham
sattvamiti uta
sattvamituta.
Sarvadvareshu dehesmin
It should be, yeah.
Sarvadvareshu
Unless he's doing a check.
Prakasha upajayate
Upajayate
Prakasha upajayate
Jnanam yada tada vidyat
Jnanam yada tada vidyat
vidyad
Vivriddham sattvamiti uta
Vivradam sattvamiti uta
Okay, would someone like to chant?
Sarvadvareshu dehesmin
Sarvadvareshu dehesmin
prakasha upajayate
Prakasha upajayate
jnanam yada sada tada vidya
Jnanam yada tada vidyat
vivruddham sattvametyuta
Vivradam sattvamiti uta
Sarvadareshu dehesmin
Sarvadvareshu dehesmin
Prakasha upajayate
Prakasha upajayate
Tada jada tada vidyad
jnanam yada tada vidya
vidyad vipritha sattamituta
vivruddham sattvametyuta
Sarvadvareshu dehesmin
Sarvadvareshu
dehesmin
Prakasha upajayate
Prakasha upajayate
Jnanam yattad vidyat
Jnanam yada tada vidyat
vidyad
Vivriddhim sattvatam ityuta
Vivriddham
sattvametyuta
sattvametyuta
Okay, word by word meaning. Sarva dwareshu,
Sarvadareshu,
Sarvadvareshu.
in all the gates.
In
in
all
all
the
the
gates.
kids.
Dehe asmin,
Dehe
Dehasmin,
asmin.
in this body.
in
In
this
this
body.
body.
Prakasha,
Prakasha.
Prakasha,
the quality of illumination.
The quality of illumination.
Illumination.
Upajayate,
Upajayate,
Upajayate.
develops.
Develop.
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 Jnanam,
Jnanam.
Jnanam,
Anam.
knowledge.
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 Yada,
Yada.
Yada,
Yada.
when.
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 Tada,
Tada.
Tada,
at that time.
At
At
that
at
that
that
time.
time.
Vidyat,
Vidya.
Vidyad,
no.
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 Vivridham,
Vivridham.
Vibruddham.
Kritam,
increased.
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 Sattvam,
Sattvam.
Sattvam.
the mode of goodness.
The
The
mode
mode
of
of
mood of
goodness.
goodness.
Ityuta,
Ityuta.
Ityuta,
thus it is said.
Thus it is
It
said.
is said.
Translation. The manifestation of the mode of goodness can be experienced when all the gates of the body are illuminated by knowledge. I will read the translation once again. The manifestation of the mode of goodness can be experienced when all the gates of the body are illuminated by knowledge. Purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Sarva Prabhupada ki jai.
There are 9 gates in the body: 2 eyes, 2 ears, 2 nostrils, the mouth, the genitals, and the anus. When every gate is illuminated by the symptoms of goodness, it should be understood that one has developed the mode of goodness. In the mode of goodness, one can see things in the right position, one can hear things in the right position, and one can taste things in the right position. One becomes cleansed inside and outside. In every gate, there is development of the symptoms of happiness, and that is the position of goodness. It's a short purport, so I'll read it once again. There are 9 gates in the body: 2 eyes, 2 ears, 2 nostrils, the mouth, the genitals, and the anus. Right. So it's basically based on the translation. Prabhupada is describing all of the various gates that we have in the body, and actually, in the yogic science, these gates to the body have a lot of importance, and at several places across these shastras, we see there is a very detailed description of the body that we have, this material body, right? And there is in fact a complete science as to how can we work with this body, right? How can we make this body to better understand who we actually are, right? So, for example, there is an entire science of Kriya Yoga, which essentially utilizes this body through various asanas, controlling the breath, and how pranavayu across the 9 gates. How by doing all of that, one can sort of have a better control on the senses, right? So it's a great science, and it has been described in great detail in all of our scriptures. Right. So here Krishna is essentially mentioning that a person who is in mode of goodness, he can experience the mode of goodness uh, through these various gates in the body. So, for example, as Prabhupada is describing, right, he can see things in the right position by the eyes, right? So we see a lot of things every day, right? But a person who is in the mode of goodness, he would naturally be inclined to see things that are in mode of goodness, right? Just like there is a very, very, very famous sort of a saying or epithet that is credited to Mahatma Gandhi about the 3 monkeys. I'm sure a few of us must have heard of it, right? The 3 monkeys of Gandhi. So the one that had 2 hands on the 2 eyes, then hands on the ears and hands on the mouth. Essentially, they indicate that one should not see bad, one should not hear bad, and one should not talk bad, right? So there too, we could see there is a lot of importance that is given to the senses through these gates of the body, right? Because these are essentially the receptors, right? Although the information is eventually going into our mind, right, or mana, and from there, these senses are essentially getting controlled, right? So based on what is our proclivity, right, or our inclination, which in turn is determined by what mode drives us, right? A person who is predominantly in mode of goodness, you could see that he would enjoy if he sees things that are in mode of goodness through his eyes, if he can smell, if he can smell, if he can engage his sense of smell in smelling something good. Similarly, a person who is in mode of goodness, he also engages his tongue in eating food that is in mode of goodness and also speaking subject matter that is in mode of goodness, right? So a person who's is predominantly in mode of goodness, right? He essentially engages all of his senses, which is exhibited through these 9 gates in the mode of goodness, right? So that's essentially what it is. And that's why we see some people, they just find a lot of joy, for example, in seeing things that are good, right? Or in hearing, for example, transcendental or good music that is in mode of goodness, right? Whereas some people you would see they like to hear, hard metal. There is a whole music industry that has come up, right? Wherein it involves a lot of noise, and usually you would see that kind of a music, hard rock or hard metal as they call it, right? It's very difficult to enjoy for someone during the morning hours, right? Like in early in the morning when you get up, it's very difficult for people to appreciate that kind of music. At that time, people, you would find that they mostly are able to appreciate nice, slow, soothing music, right? Because that kind of a music is in mode of goodness, and because mornings are usually considered to be in mode of goodness, right? So they sort of resonate with each other, right? So these modes of goodness are essentially dominating everything that we see around us, right? The material nature, because that's what this material nature is constituted of, right? It's made up of these 3 modes. As Krishna is saying, Purusha Prakriti Stohi, Bhunkte Prakriti Jan Gunan, Karanam Gun Sangasya, Sat Asad Yoni Janmashu, right? So Purusha Prakriti Stohi. So Purusha is usually used for God. Purusha is a term that is used for the enjoyer, actually. Although we have repurposed it to identify it with male, but the real meaning of Purusha is enjoyer. It's not really male, but because over a period of time, as there was social degradation, right, and predominantly males were controlling the society, so this word was repurposed to identify with male, that we are the enjoyers. But really, the real Purusha and the only Purusha is Krishna, or the Supreme Person, right? But because we are his part and parcels, we are also Purusha in that sense, right? So we also enjoy, but we are not the supreme enjoyers, right? And of course, the society repurposed that term for males, but really for any living entity, right? Purusha could be used for any living entity, and Krishna is using this word Purusha in this verse in that context, in the context of the living entity or the superior energy of Krishna, right? So Krishna is saying Purusha Prakriti Stohi. Prakriti is the inferior energy of Krishna, or Maya, which is constituted of the 3 modes of material nature, right? Bhunkte Prakriti Jan Gunan. So Bhunkte means to exploit, right? We are trying to exploit these 3 modes of material nature. Bhunkte Prakriti Jan Gunan. Prakriti again is the inferior energy of Krishna, material nature. And Jan means birth, born out of, right? Bhunkte Prakriti Jan Gunan. Gun again, the 3 modes of material nature, right? Those in Sanskrit are called gunas, right? The 3 gunas. Traigunya Vishya Veda, right? These 3 gunas, mode of goodness, mode of passion, and mode of ignorance, right? So these 3 modes, in this verse, Krishna is very clearly explaining that these are actually born out of the inferior energy of Krishna, or Prakriti. And Purusha, what we are trying to do, Bhunkte means to exploit. We are trying to exploit these 3 modes of material nature. Karanam Guna Sangasya, and on account of our association with these 3 modes, Sat Asat Yoni Janmishu. Sat means good asat means bad, right? So janmashu means to take birth. So we are stuck in the circle of life and death, right? Sometimes we take birth in higher species or higher forms of life, like in the form of demigods. Sometimes we take birth as lower forms of life, like a fish or a worm or a germ, stuff like that. So that's all it is, right? So based on our association of these three modes of material nature, because of our proclivity to exploit these three modes of material nature. And why is that? Because we misidentify ourselves with this material nature. On account of that misidentification or false ego, we think that we are actually enjoying these three modes of material nature. But the fact is that we ourselves are getting exploited, right? Because our intention or our proclivity towards enjoying these three modes of material nature is what keeps us bound to this material world, right? So we are just stuck here. And that's what Krishna is explaining in this verse, right? Purusha prakriti stoi bhungte prakriti jan guna karanam gun sangasya sat asat yoni janmashu. So this is the whole reason. The entire reason for our existence in this material world and our suffering in this material world is because we are trying to exploit the three modes of material nature. Whereas that's not our true identity, right? What is our true identity? Mamevamsho jiva loke jiva bhuta sanatana mana sasthani indriyani prakriti sthani karshati. Right? Mam ev ansh, Krishna is explaining. These living entities are actually my part and parcels, right? So we are actually transcendental. We are part and parcel of the Supreme Purush or the Supreme Enjoyer, right? And our eternal nature is to serve Krishna directly. But because of our misidentification of this material, misidentification with this material nature, right? We want to enjoy independent of Krishna. We are trying to exploit these three modes of material nature, right? And on account of that association, we just keep moving around in this 8.4 million species of life, right? Sometimes taking birth in the higher species, sometimes taking birth in the lower species. And that too, Krishna is explaining really nicely. I think it's in the 14th chapter itself, that how people in different modes of material nature, right? We can understand what's their future or what's their fate, right? So Krishna is saying, Urdhvam Gachanti Sattam Stha. So people who are predominantly driven by the mode of goodness, Urdhvam Gachanti means to be promoted, to go up. They transcend, or they move up from this human form of life. They usually take birth as some kind of a demigod. So people, that's why sometimes when a person passes away who has done a lot of good deeds, we must have heard, especially in India, that uska swargavas ho gaya, right? People usually use this term swargavas. So this is actually coming from here, right? So people who are predominantly driven by good deeds, they usually move up towards Swargaloka or the higher planets, and they become demigods, right? So that's the outcome of the mode of goodness. So, someone might think that that's actually a good thing, right? Because instead of staying here, because we usually consider Swargaloka or the heaven, what we call heaven literally, we consider heaven to be a good place, right? But if you really think about it, it's really no different from this material, from these earthly planets, in the sense, although you get a higher kind of happiness, but the nature of that happiness is still material, right? And what's the nature of material happiness? We discussed this in great detail last time when we had the discussion, right? So the nature of this material happiness is that the effect of that happiness reduces with time, right? So just like we gave the example of a sweet, right? A person who is extremely hungry, right? And has not eaten for a while. If you give him one sweet, like a chocolate, right? He would relish it really nicely. He's like, oh my God, what did I get? It's such a nice thing. It's such a wonderful thing, right? So he would really enjoy that one chocolate. Then you give him a second chocolate, right? And he would enjoy that again. But then when you give him the third chocolate, right? He would get bored of it. He would get tired of it. In fact, if he eats that third one, and he keeps doing that over a period of time, there is a good chance that he would become overweight, develop all kinds of material ailments, right? and it could lead him to diabetes and so on and so forth. So the happiness that started initially with, it was something that started with great joy, eventually turns into misery. So that's the nature of material happiness. Whereas transcendental happiness is the total opposite, right? So initially, we are currently struggling to obtain a taste of the transcendental happiness. But once we achieve that, the nature of the transcendental happiness, that it is ever increasing, right? And we discussed how in Sikshastakam, actually, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is in the very first paragraph, he's very clearly explaining how by chanting the holy names of Lord would result in us experiencing the transcendental happiness that keeps increasing with time, right? So that's the nature of material happiness. So therefore, we should understand that by staying in these modes of material nature, even if you are in mode of goodness, that could at the most lead us to get a higher birth in the demigods and so on and so forth. But that too has to end at some point, right? That ultimately ends, and eventually there is a chance that we might again get attracted or attached to the lower modes of material nature, namely the mode of passion and the mode of ignorance, right? And if we tend to get attached to them at some point, they would lead us to the lower planets, right? So urdhvam gachanti sattvam stha madhye tishtanti rajasa. Madhye tishtanti rajasa. Madhye means in the middle planets. So these earthly planets are actually in the middle of the overall creation, right? So we have the higher planets or the heavenly planets, the middle planets or these earthly planets, and then we have the lower planets. Adho gachanti tamasa, Krishna is saying. So the people who are in mode of ignorance, adho gachanti means they travel downwards. So they actually travel into the lower species of life, right? So human form of life is considered to be in between, in the middle, right? Then there are certain birds that are higher than the human form of life, and there are certain birds, of course, in the animal kingdom, which are lower than the human form of life, right? So we keep traveling based on the predominant driving mode that drives our actions, really, right? So the real question should be that how do we get out of these three modes of material nature, right? And that's the exact question that actually Arjuna is asking from Krishna. Later on, when we move ahead in this chapter, we will see that Arjuna asked this question, that how can we transcend these three modes of material nature? And Krishna gives a very direct reply. He is not beating around the bush. He very clearly says in one paragraph, he's short on time, he has a war to fight, right? So he's very succinct. Throughout the Bhagavad Gita, we would find in just 700 verses, actually, he has given us the entire philosophy, right? A complete package. So very clearly, Krishna mentions what's the best way, right? Mamayo avyabhicharena bhakti yogena sevate, Krishna is saying. Mamayo avyabhicharena bhakti yogena sevate. Sagunan sarvatite tam brahman bhunjaya kalpate, Krishna is saying, right? So mamayo avyabhicharena bhakti yogena sevate. By serving me through the bhakti yoga, a person can transcend these three modes of material nature. Sagunan samatite tam. Completely, a person can totally transcend these three modes of material nature by engaging oneself in the service of Krishna through bhakti yoga. Yomam avyabhicharena. So this term avyabhicharena is very, very important here, right? Because we would see throughout Bhagavad Gita that Krishna, because he is the supreme person, right? Whatever he speaks perfect truth, right? So that's why you would see there are certain qualifiers that he always attaches to whatever promises that he makes or whatever suggestions he's giving. So here too, Krishna is saying, Mamayo avyabhicharena. Avyabhicharena means without deviation, right? Bhakti yogena sevate. A person who serves me through bhakti yoga, he can transcend these three modes of material nature instantly, right? So Brahma bhuyaya kalpate, he's saying, right? So instantly, from his existence in this material form of life, he is immediately transcended into the Brahman realization, right? The transcendental realm, right? As we know Brahman, right? Na jayate mriyate va kadachin nayam bhutva bhavita vana bhuya Ajo nityo shashvato yam purano na hanyate hanyamane sharire. Right. So what is Brahma? Brahma is the totally opposite of material creation, right? So this material creation, everything has a beginning and everything has an end, right? That's what the material nature is, and that's what gives birth to time, right? That's why in the true transcendental way, in the transcendental world, there is no idea of time, right? There is no time because there is no beginning and there is no end. Whereas in the material world, we have a beginning and we have an end, right? Anything that we take, whatever you can imagine, there is always a beginning and there is always an end. But Krishna is saying that who we actually are, na jayate mriyate va kadachin, na jayate mriyate. There is no birth and there is no death. Our true identity is that of a Brahman, which does not take birth and that does not die. So Krishna is saying, Mam yo avya vicharena, bhakti yogena sevate. A person who serves me undeviated through the bhakti yoga, right, without deviation in the bhakti yoga, he at once comes to the transcendental platform, to Brahman realization. He is no more situated in the material realization of life, right? And as we just discussed, right, all of these three modes of material nature come within the purview of the material nature, right? These are in fact the constituents of the material nature, right? So these three modes actually make up the material nature. So by performing Krishna's bhakti or the devotional service unto the lotus feet of Krishna, but the key qualifier here is undeviated, without deviation. If we do that constantly, we can surpass these three modes of material nature, right? And we can come to the transcendental realization that we are actually beyond these three modes of material nature, right? But now, a person could ask how to do that. To say that it's easy, right? But what's the process? How can we do that, right? And to that, Krishna is very clearly saying in Bhagavad Gita at several places. For example, Mam mana mad bhakto madhyaji mam namaskuru mam eveshati ashanchaya atmanam mat prayana. Right. This verse comes actually twice. Once in chapter 9 and once in chapter 18, like towards the very end. And 9th chapter is of course the middle portion of Bhagavad Gita. So just like in a movie, you have an intermission and you have an end, right? Those are the two very critical moments in a movie. Similarly, here the very last verse of chapter 9 is actually Man mana bhav mad bhakto madhyaji mam namaskuru mam eveshati yuktaiva atmanam mat parayana. That's the verse that Krishna is speaking in chapter 9. In chapter 18, he gives a slight, it's mostly the same verse, but there's a slight change to it. But the slight change is very, very important, and something, something that tells us the beauty of Bhakti Yoga, right? So in chapter 18, towards the very end, I think it's verse number 64, if I'm not wrong. So that's towards the very end. Krishna is again repeating the same verse, right? So he's giving the process. Man mana bhav mad bhakto madhyaji mam namaskuru, right? So man mana, think about me. Man mana mad bhakto, and become my devotee. Madhyaji, worship me, engage in my worship. Mam namaskuru, right? And pay obeisances unto me, right? So he's explaining this process. If we can think of Krishna, if we can practice the Bhakti Yoga, right? If we can render our devotional service towards Krishna, if we can worship Krishna, pay obeisances unto him, right? So by doing all of this, it can be ensured that we can go back to Krishna. That's what Krishna is saying. Okay. And Krishna is giving a reason also. In chapter 9, he's giving a reason why, right? Atmana mat parayana, he's saying. Because you are then surrendered unto me. By doing all of this, you would be surrendered unto me, right? So he's giving a logical explanation as to why, by doing all of this, you can transcend these three modes of material nature and come unto me. Why? Because Atmana mat parayana, because at that point, by engaging in these kind of activities, your natural inclination would be towards me, right? Instead of getting attached to the three modes of material nature, you would be attached to me, right? So that's very logical. Yeah. So just like, Krishna at other place in Bhagavad Gita is saying, Yadyad vapi smaran bhavam tyajte ante kalevaram tam evaiti kaunteya sadatad bhava bhavita. So whatever a person thinks at the moment of death, right, at the time of leaving this body, whatever a person's inclination is, he eventually attains to that nature. Right? So that's what Krishna is saying in Bhagavad Gita. So that time, at the time of leaving a material body, whatever we at that time, whatever is our nature, right? Whatever is our inclination, that particular inclination is then facilitated so that we can obtain to that nature in the next life as well, right? And of course, if at that time we are engaged in the thought of Krishna, if you would want to serve Krishna at that time, because of our lifelong practice in Bhakti Yoga, our inclination would be to go back to Krishna instead of going back or coming back into one of these three modes of material nature. Our natural inclination would be to approach Krishna, right? And therefore, there is nothing unnatural into what Krishna is saying. It's very logical, right? That we would, without fail, attain to that nature, right? But then the question comes, even after doing all of this, what if we are not totally inclined or completely surrendered unto the lotus feet of Krishna? What happens then, right? That could be a natural question, and that question, comes many a times in the life of the devotees, because our inclination towards material nature is many, many births long, right? Since time immemorial, we have been serving material nature, whereas our inclination towards Krishna is only recent, right? And that's also, as we all understand, right, that's so weak. No matter how hard we try, there is always, we are surrounded by these three modes of material nature all the time, right? They are just so close to us. And because our mind, which is also material, right, its natural inclination is to engage in the service of these three modes, because these three modes are also material. Our mind is also material, right? So they have a good time together. Whereas Krishna is transcendental, right? Therefore, it is so difficult for us to engage our mind in Krishna consciousness, right? So even though we may try, but it could be that, we do not attain that state wherein Atmanam Mat Parayana, right? So it is possible, a natural question could come that we may not be naturally inclined to surrender ourselves onto the lotus feet of Krishna, even after performing some of these principles of Bhakti Yoga. And that's why, Krishna, after saying this in chapter 9, towards the very end, he should have actually concluded, right? Because then Arjuna knew that if I serve Krishna, that's the perfection and that's the done deal. But after chapter 9, Krishna had to speak for another 9 chapters for Arjuna to be convinced, right? So towards the very end, Krishna is saying, Man manabhav madhakto madhyaji mam namaskuru mam eveshati satyam te pratijani prayosi me. So that the last line, there is a slight change in the last line, although the first 2 lines are pretty much the same. But the last line he's saying, Mam eveshati satyam te pratijani prayosi me. Right? Pratijani means I promise you, prayosi me, because you are so dear to me. Priya means very dear. Oh Arjuna, if you do these activities, man mana bhav mad bhakto madhyaji mam namaskuru mam eveshati, you will certainly come to me. Satyam te, I'm telling you the truth. Pratijani, and I promise it to you because you are so dear to me, right? So on the strength of his relationship to Arjuna as a friend, because he's a very dear devotee and a friend of Krishna, just on the strength of that relationship, Krishna is actually making a promise to him that do not worry, because that's probably the question that Arjuna had in his mind, that although after doing all of this, right, I worship you, I surrender unto you, like, I engage in devotional service unto you, I worship you, I pay my obeisances unto you, right? I do all of those things. But what if my natural inclination is not to surrender unto you, your lotus feet? What happens then? But Krishna then is making a promise in the very end. Oh, don't worry, do not worry. I promise you, because you are so dear to me, you will certainly come to me, right? Why will I lie to you? That's a promise, right? So on the strength of that relationship, right, he's invoking that relationship with Arjuna, that because you are my dear friend, forget all of the logic, right? I'm not explaining any logic to you now. Simply on the strength of our relationship, I'm promising you that if you do all of those activities, you will undoubtedly develop an attachment to me and you will come to me, right? And that I find a very beautiful thing, right? Because that is the strength and that is the biggest differentiation between Bhakti Yoga and, other spiritual paths. For example, Jnana Yoga, right? So in the case of Jnana Yoga, you're dependent upon the knowledge that you attain. And through that knowledge, you're trying to transcend the modes of material nature. But in Bhakti Yoga, on the strength of our relationship with Krishna, and more importantly, with Krishna's devotees, right? Just on the strength of that relationship, sometimes that strength of that relationship is good enough for us to transcend these material modes, right? And that's why our focus should be, because if we just rely on our own efforts, right, there is a good chance that we would make it, but there is also a chance, that we may not be able to make it. There is a chance that we may not develop that 100% surrender unto the lotus feet of Krishna, right? It could happen, and that's a very valid question, right? But if we share a very strong bond with the pure devotees of Krishna, right? In this case, Arjuna shared a bond with Krishna himself, right? But in our case, of course, we do not personally know Krishna, but we know someone who is even more important than Krishna. And who is that? That is a devotee of Krishna. Because Krishna can break his own promise, but he never breaks the promise of his devotees, right? So actually, to have that bond with a true devotee, a person who is totally surrendered unto Krishna, a pure devotee of Krishna, right? If we share that relationship, that kind of a strong attachment to a pure devotee of Krishna, and who is the purest devotee of Krishna? That's the Guru, right? So by following his directions, if we develop a very strong bond with the pure devotees of Krishna, just on account of that relationship, the strength of that relationship, we can transcend these three modes of material nature, right? And the way it works is, it's for us that we have to do it. It's not like devotees shower their mercy only on their friends who are attached to them. It's not like that. Devotees are always ready to shower their mercy on everyone, and so is Krishna, right? Krishna is also all the time, his ultimate desire is that all of us living entities who are separated parts and parcel of Krishna, we can come back to him, right? So his ultimate desire is always for us to come back to him, right? And he went to the extent, he comes to this material world so many times, right? Very latest, he came as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and he just freely distributed this devotional service, this Harinam, to everyone, right? So they are very, very freely distributing this mercy, right? But if we do not share that relationship with them, we are not accepting that mercy, right? Because we do not share that bond with them. When they say something to us, we just do not accept that. Whereas if we share a strong bond with them, we will be able to accept that mercy when they are giving that mercy to us, right? We'll be sort of more obedient, or we'll have more trust or more faith into whatever they are asking us to do, right? Because that's how it works. Just to give you an example, I'll share a small story, a realization that I recently got, right? So when I was in 12th grade, I was in Delhi, I was studying in Delhi at that time. And we had like a place in Lajpat Nagar. One of my very close friends, he used to live there. So, and I was in a hostel, right? So once in a month, we used to go there just to have fun, all sorts of nonsensical things. But, that was sort of our cave where we used to have a lot of fun. And very close to that place, there was a doctor. He was a retired military doctor, a very nice guy. He was already retired, so he was aged. And we used to call him uncle. And we used to sort of visit him sometimes. And one of my friends, actually, he was related to him, right? So we used to visit his home also sometimes. So we shared sort of a bond with him. And whenever I had any kind of a medical problem, I usually used to visit him. So this one time, I developed a boil like very close to my neck, and it became so bad that I was not even able to move my head. Just was hurting so much. My entire body was in pain. So I was visiting that area, and I decided to see the doctor uncle, to see if he can help me, right? So I went to him, and at that I went in the peak hours, right? So there were a lot of patients sitting in the clinic. So I approached him, and he took a look at it, and he told me that, look, if you want a relief from this pain very quickly, right, the best way is, let me operate on it. I'll just clean it up. There will be a small cut that I have to make to take all the nonsensical stuff out of there, and you will be relieved immediately. The other thing is, I give you some antibiotics, and it might take 3 days for this wound to dry up completely, right? So what do you want to do? And of course, it was hurting so much, I couldn't even imagine someone touching it forget about someone actually cleaning it, I was like shivering in the thought of it. So I told him, just give me antibiotics. I'll somehow survive for the 3 days. So, and he was in a rush. So he said, okay, he just prescribed some antibiotics and then I went home. But then, it just went so bad. By the next morning, I wasn't even, during the night, I wasn't even able to sleep, right? So the next morning, I went to him again. I told him that, look, I'm really suffering. I'm not really sure what should I do. And at that point, there were not many people there. He sort of just opened his clinic, right? So I went at the right time. And then he told me that, look, I won't do anything. Let me just take a look at it, just lie down on this table. And he had all his tools with him, but he just told me that I won't do anything. Just trust me. Just have faith on me and you will feel a lot of relief. I won't do anything. It won't hurt, nothing. And while he kept saying that to me, he started doing his thing, right? He started cleaning it and I was feeling the pain, but he just on the strength of a relationship, right? Because we shared that relationship. I just allowed him to sort of intervene into my free will. I was totally resistant to that idea of him actually cleaning it up physically because it was paining so much. But on the strength of that relationship, he pushed me to a little bit, he pushed a certain boundary and I accepted his pushing behavior because I had a certain faith on him. I had certain trust on him. I had a bond with him, right? So I allowed him to do that. And as soon as he got done, although it pained for that time, but I found that relief immediately, actually, right? So the point is, when we share a bond with a devotee, right, what happens is, although he's ready to, he was even ready to do that before, right? But I just did not allow him to do that. But when you share a bond with a devotee, you would allow him to intervene and you would accept whatever he's trying to help you, whatever he's wanting you to do in order so that you can be helped, right? So it's actually for our own benefit that we develop that kind of a bond with the devotees around us, right? And on the strength of that relationship, the way the Bhakti Yoga works, of course, it's not like just on the strength of the relationship. We have to try hard. We really have to be inclined to sort of go beyond the 3 modes of material nature. But then again, when you share a strong bond with the devotees, there is a high chance, just like whatever association you take, you tend to develop that kind of a mindset, right? So you would automatically be inclined to transcend these 3 modes and be attached and associated with Krishna, right? So that's the key. And to share a bond with devotees is even more beneficial than the state where Arjuna was, where he shared a bond with Krishna. Because as I said, Krishna can break his own promise, but he can never break whatever promise a devotee makes, right? Just like he did during the Mahabharata fight, right? He allowed his own vow to be broken by lifting an astra. He lifted the wheel and he ran towards Bhishma Pitama to kill him. But he did not let the vow that Bhishma Pitama took to be broken, right? So he honored the vow that his devotee took and he broke his own vow, right? So that's Krishna, he's just so merciful. So our safest bet is to develop that strong relationship, that bond with the devotees around us, right? The pure devotees of Krishna. And when we share that relationship, it just provides us a much better opportunity for us to be able to transcend these 3 modes of material nature. Because just by relying on our own effort, we cannot be so sure because there is so much going on. We are always surrounded by these 3 modes of material nature, right? So just by relying on our own strength, it could get a little tricky, it could get a little difficult. But once we share that relationship, that bond with some of the pure devotees of Krishna, it becomes easy. Just like Prabhupada used to say, just hold my dhoti, right? It's a very famous pastimes that is often shared by the devotees, right? Prabhupada told some devotees that just hold my dhoti and I'll take you to Krishna, right? So if we can just hold the dhoti of a pure devotee of Krishna, that would lead us to perfection. Of course, by engaging ourselves, it does not mean that we should get reluctant, right? Of course, we have to adopt Krishna consciousness with full vigor. We have to be very, very attentive in whatever we are doing. But at the same time, it's important for us to share that bond with the pure devotees of Krishna, and that would eventually help us to transcend the 3 modes of material nature. So with that, I'll take a pause. It's close to 7:45 actually. If anyone has any questions or comments.
So, Uncle Prabhu, I liked your example of trust.
Thank you, Mataji.
And it's not easy to, exactly like you said, even if it is something not palatable,
Right.
we'll accept it from someone we trust,
Mhm.
as opposed to someone we don't. That same exact, advice is not going to come through well to us.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mataji.
And that's, I think, goes across the board, even at work or, in personal relationships or spiritual relationships across the board. I think that's true.
Absolutely, Mataji. Yep. I mean, we see this in our material day-to-day lives as well, right? The amount of, if my father tells me something versus a total stranger, I will more likely to go what my father is advising without questioning him too much, right? Because I have such a trust on him, on the strength of that relationship, right? So we just tend to be more receptive to the advice or the suggestions coming from people who we actually trust, right? And that's the beauty of Krishna consciousness, that we have a community, with which we can really, really engage and develop that kind of a bond. And that's how, the entire devotional services bhakti process really works. We hold each other's hand to eventually approach Krishna. And Krishna is actually, as I gave the example, in chapter 18, the same verse, Krishna is speaking in chapter 9, in chapter 18. The only difference is in chapter 18, towards the very end, he is invoking the strength of relationship that he shares with Arjuna. And that satisfies Arjuna, right? Because chapter 18 is the conclusion, right? That's where Krishna sort of ends. So he has been talking for so long, giving all sorts of explanations, and eventually he just invokes that relationship that he shares with Arjuna, and that's what satisfies Arjuna eventually, right? So when Krishna is employing that same strategy, of course, it makes sense for us to emulate that.
Yeah, definitely. Even in any relationship, even in work relationships. Yeah.
Right.
Hare Krishna, we just learned today that by trusting and devoting, making a bond between each other, we can surrender to Krishna more. By we can reach Krishna or surrender to Krishna.
More easy.
But that's what we learned, right?
Thank you so much, Mataji.
It makes it easier to trust and make a bond, right?
Yeah.
I mean, trust is the foundation of bhakti. You cannot be a devotee if there is absence of trust.
Yeah.
Yep. As we say, right? Adhara, right? So it starts from a little faith, right? And that faith then leads us to sadhu sangha, devotee association, right? And that becomes the base. That sadhu sangha is the entire foundation, the foundation of bhakti yoga, right? And trust is extremely, extremely important amongst us devotees, and we should be very, very much mindful when we are dealing with each other. We should be careful that we should not break that trust, right? Because Krishna does not appreciate that. And that's why we see out of the 10 offenses towards Harinam, the topmost offense is to blaspheme the devotees who are engaged in Krishna service, right? What we call Vaishnava Aprad. Vaishnava Aprad is the topmost, because Vaishnava Aprad, that's what it does. It breaks the trust amongst the devotees. It's sort of like a poison in the beautiful pond of Krishna consciousness. Right? So we have to be very much mindful that with our actions, we should not break that trust.
Thank you, Prabhuji.
Thank you,
And
Mataji.
good night.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anyone else has any questions or realization?
Prabhuji, Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
So, so as a sadhaka, when we ask something to Krishna, and if there are two options, option one is after this particular life, what a sadhaka want. If sadhaka says, okay, I want devotee association, option one, and option two is devotional service. So which one we should ask for, devotional service or devotee association?
Prabhu, that's a very good question and actually a tricky one, right? In my personal understanding, if I am given that choice, I would go for devotee association, right? Because when you are in devotee association, you would naturally be performing devotional service, right? That would naturally happen. But if you do not have devotee association, right, and you are just performing devotional service, you could do it for a while, right? But eventually that would dry up because you won't have encouragement, right? Eventually you will feel frustrated, right? It's like a journey alone becomes very lengthy and difficult to do. If you are in association of people who are engaged in a certain kind of an activity, you would naturally be doing that. So actually by asking for the association of the devotees, you will get devotional service, right? So in my opinion, that's a more intelligent choice, that we ask for devotee association, because by getting devotee association, by default, as a bonus, you would automatically get devotional service. Whereas if you just ask for devotional service, Krishna will probably award you a devotee association, because devotional service is not really possible without devotee association, right? So in a way, I think, Krishna being Krishna, he would in either case provide you with devotee association, no matter what you ask.
And Srila Prabhupada says without devotee association, you cannot make any advancement anyway. So you're right. That is important.
Yeah, Prabhuji. And again, don't take it like I put you on the spot. This is a question I was asking myself. So, but thank you, Prabhuji. Because in Sri Sishtastakam, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is asking for a devotional service.
Right.
I believe, like regardless of however many births they get, but that's a very elevated stage. I can understand. But for us, like
yeah, that's a good point, right? So he's asking for devotional service, right? But the point that I just made, even by asking for devotional service, because devotional service is simply not possible without devotee association, right? Just like if you look at Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, right? He was surrounded by devotees, and what he preached was Nam Sankirtan. Sankirtan means, the word sang is important, right? It's not just kirtan, it's Sankirtan. So kirtan in the association of a sangha, in the association of the devotees, that was a primary message that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu gave us. Sankirtan. He did not say kirtan, right? We take a look at so many pictures of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Have you ever seen Mahaprabhu like doing the kirtan? We have never encountered that, right? Mahaprabhu is always surrounded by the Bhakti Vrinda, by a group of devotees, very enlightened devotees who are always chanting Harinam and helping him chanting Harinam, right? So although he's asking Krishna for the devotional service, but by asking for devotional service, you get devotee association as a default. And similarly, if you ask for devotee association, you would get devotional service as a default by bonus. So I think both of them, they actually go hand in hand. We should not look at them as separate.
thank you, Prabhuji. Thank you so much.
Yep. Thank you. Thank you for asking such a nice question, Prabhu.
Nice question. Very nice answer.
Anyone else? All right. So if not, we will conclude here. Vancha kalpitaru Anant Koti Vaishnavrinda ki
Jai.
Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.